Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Focus on Liberia. Welcome to yet another edition of our program, Roundtable Africa, with Mr. Sekou Kelleh and Mr. Edward Amara, based in Freetown, Sierra Leone. He is our West African correspondent, and I'm associated here with these two brilliant minds of Liberia, and to discuss the issue of Africa in today's edition of Roundtable Africa. Folks, the topic is more than exciting. We will be discussing Eurocentrism versus Pan-Africanism. The last time we were here in the first edition, we discussed Pan-Africanism. Now we are discussing Eurocentrism versus Pan-Africanism. And so you want to know, or we want to know, we want to tell you that Pan-Africanism is the African worldview, and also Eurocentrism is the European worldview. Now, the interesting questions these two outstanding guys will be finding answers for are as follows. Number one, what is Eurocentrism? They will be able to provide a very critical answer on that one. Another question, what's the difference between Eurocentrism and Pan-Africanism? These questions and many other questions that are very interesting, these two outstanding guys will be discussing here today in this edition of Roundtable Africa. So folks, stay tight, stay tuned, and let us get started. Let me welcome Mr. Sekou Kelleh. Sekou, welcome. Another edition, my man. I'm ready.
Yeah, thank you very much, Johnson Seed, and thank you for all our viewers. I'm happy to be here, and then we are fired up.
I can see that you are fired up, and also the gentleman who will be the co-host of this program, Roundtable Africa, is our man Edward Amara, based in Freetown, Sierra Leone. Edward, another edition. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I'm way away in the eastern part of Sierra Leone, Kelleh City. I'm very happy to join this educative, fantastic program again. Thank you very much.
All right, the stage is set. These gentlemen are all set, and we are going to start this conversation. Gentlemen, let's go to the topic. We don't want to waste time here. We have this business to take care of. The first question I think I have on my mind, and I think the audience have on their mind, is this topic of Eurocentrism versus Pan-Africanism. We defined Pan-Africanism the last time. So what is Eurocentrism? And let's start with you, Sekou.
Yeah, thank you very much. Once again, I'm grateful to be on this platform. When you hear the term Eurocentrism, it's an ideology that promotes European culture, history, and philosophy at the expense of the rest of the world. They believe that European culture and history is supreme and superior to the culture of the rest of the world. That is in a nutshell, that's what Eurocentrism is. But I would like to provide a historical background to how this ideology came about. So if I have the time, I will try to explain. Eurocentrism, was born through between 19th century and the 18th century. But the idea itself, if you want to know how Europeans came to believe that their culture is supreme and superior to the rest of the world, you have to look at their history. There are three important periods in the history of Europeans. The first period was between the 5th century till the 14th century. It's called the Dark Ages of Europe. The Dark Ages of Europe is between the end of the Roman Empire and the modern period. So during this period, Europeans lost the science, they lost the knowledge, and they went back into what we call barbarism. Their society, there was no education, there was no what you call civilized system that you have today. So they refer to that period as the Dark Ages of Europe. Knowledge disappeared completely, and Europe went into darkness. Witches were burned on the street, people were killed, just some of the things you can describe today as primitive. So from the Dark Ages, from the 5th to the 14th century, Europe was in Dark Ages. Then from the 15th century until from the 15th century until 17th century, there was what we call the Renaissance age. We started from 15th century. So the Renaissance age was where the Enlightenment came back to Europe. The Europeans remember that the Greek and the Romans were their ancestors, and their knowledge was in Europe before. So they discovered it through the Arabs, because Islam was in its golden age during this period. So they learned from the Arab about themselves, and they began to revive their knowledge. So during the Renaissance period, which started from the 15th century, Europeans started traveling around the world. That's how they came into contact with Africans and enslaved Africans. So during the Renaissance age, they were trying to portray themselves to the world that their culture was superior and they were intellectually superior, forgetting that they came out of dark ages. So whoever they came across, any society they came across that is also in their own dark ages, they do not consider the history of those people. They just assume they are primitive. They just assume those people are backward, and they have to play the civilizing role of trying to civilize people. So in a nutshell, Eurocentrism is the promotion of European culture and history at the detriment of other people's culture and history.
Thank you so very much. Let me come to you, Edward. You're listening to your colleague there trying to provide answer to the question, what is Eurocentrism? But the question I have for you, Edward, and you can chime in if you want on that question too. What is the history and who were the forerunners of Eurocentrism?
Oh, thank you very much. As he was rightly explaining, when we are talking about Eurocentrism, we talk about European way of thinking that they are superior, more important than others. They feel into that arrogant manner. Eurocentrism was started as the term itself donates, something that started in Europe. And we'll talk about Eurocentrism, we are referring to Europe. But even in Europe, we watch at the Western Europe because they were the most powerful countries by then. When all about Eurocentrism is just the white man mentality, especially the Europeans, their way of thinking and viewing Africans and the rest of the world that they are not that up to standard and they deserve to be civilized, educated, and even introduce some religion. So these are some of the things that they use to justify their means of aggression in North Africa. Coming about, I think Eurocentrism all started from the 1800s to the 1900s, when there was actually a need in Europe. You know, before this time, Europeans have actually depended on Africans to develop their way of life, because we used to have our brothers and sisters who were forcefully taken into Europe to ensure that these people are enslaved. But reached to a stage that in the 1900s, industrialization took place in Europe, and the European society became exposed. And they realized that there is nothing else more that could be needed out of these slaves. And they realized that since there is industrialization, improvement into technology, then there must be a need for them to encroach on other things. So Eurocentrism started within this particular age, and there was a felt need to Europe that the best way for them to concretize and continue to doing what they are doing is to actually look for a vital ground where they can exhibit their own knowledge and whatsoever thing. So into that doing, Europe watched at Africa, that Africa, especially Western Europe, we all have Great Britain. We have Great Britain. We talk about their four countries that are involved. Think about France, Belgium, Italy, Greece. So they felt that there is a need now for them to introduce what they have learned, not knowing that they also emanated from this same dark age. So they decided to invade Africa. So all about it came at a time when they feel and believe that they need to intervene into Africa, divide Africa, exploit our natural resources, and they have to use pieces of excuses to justify their hold onto the African continent by saying Africans are uncivilized, we are not educated, we are undeveloped, we do not run a kind of democratic government, and they believe that since there is a superiority into their own culture, then the Europeans started doing it, and all started within that particular time.
Thank you so very much. Folks in cyberspace watching us here. This is Roundtable Africa with Sekou, Kelleh, and Edward Amara. I'm Anthony C. moderating this excellent discussion here. Let's come to the next question, gentlemen. And the question is, what is the difference between Eurocentrism and Pan-Africanism? Sekou?
Yes. Thank you very much, Anthony. Like I said in the beginning of my presentation, if you want to understand Eurocentrism, you look at how Europe evolved. So when you understand that, the three important historical moments in European history that I just mentioned, first being the Dark Ages of Europe, the European Renaissance, and the Industrial Revolution. So these three moments were the one that gave birth to modern Europe. So a European culture and European history being imposed on the rest of the world is what we call Eurocentrism. Now, Pan-Africanism is a humanist ideology based on the emancipation of African people from European colonialism, from oppression. So Pan-Africanism is only advocating for African liberation, for African freedom, for African to evolve to a level of egalitarian society, to build a vibrant economy and not be under the oppression of Europeans. So while Europeans are advocating for oppression, for their own economic gain, Pan-Africanism is advocating for African independence, economic, military sovereignty.
All right, Edward?
Yeah, I think he highlighted some important things. You see, Eurocentrism is all based on exploitation, trying to determine the African man condition, and in order for their own society to be well developed. So they came with an arrogant attitude, and they pretend they use what is our scapegoat mentality, saying that they want to civilize, develop, and educate Africa. But that was not the main reason why they came. They actually came to exploit us. So Africans having undergone the ramification or the harm Eurocentrism has done to them. So they decided now to create their own organization. So Africa, the Pan-Africanist mentality is actually based on saving Africa from the exploitation of European mentality, having knowing that all what they have undergone was out of a lot of manipulation, and even the pieces of excuses that was given by these Europeans to actually during the struggle for colonization of Africa, that was within the 1900s, we are all used as a cover blanket to ensure that they adequately exploit all with the notion that they are coming to develop us. So all of them felt that they were victims. So our African elite, who were actually educated by them, they realized that the best way for them to stop the Europeans exploiting Africa, because up to now we are living under new colonialism, is to form the Pan-African Union. So Pan-Africanism was actually formed with the firm belief that Africans should still have the opportunity to be rescued from these exploiters or our spirit.
Thank you, Edward. Now, let's come to the impact that colonialism had on Africa, and we are asking the question, gentlemen, what is the impact of colonialism in Africa?
Yes. So when you talk about the impact of colonialism, you talk about three things: economic, politics, and culture. So on a political level, what's the impact?
Sekou, may I just be on this side so we can see you? Yeah, fine. Thank you. All right. Just get in the middle there, on the other side. Thank you. Go ahead now.
Okay,
you're fine.
So we talk about economic, politics, and culture. So we talk about the political impact of colonialism. First of all, you need to understand when Europeans came, African society were evolving. We were having empires, we were having kingdoms. We just lost our classical civilization in Egypt and Sudan. So we went back into what they were calling dark ages as well. Our society regressed. The writing system was lost. A lot of things were lost. So we were trying to pick up again by building empires. So our society were evolving from feudalist system. We were moving towards building states. And then they interrupted the natural evolution of African society. That's what colonialism, it interrupted the natural development of African societies. That's one. Then economically, colonialism was about exploitation. Human and material resources. They exploited the continent for 500 years. In fact, there is if you look at the book called How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney, which I posted to you, you will see that the economic system, the capitalism that you have today was based on slavery. That the black people that were taken out of Africa, they were the first capital that Europeans used to enter into the modern industrial stage. Because when you have millions of people working on your farm and you are not paying them, and your labor is free, that can turn your nation into into the richest nation within 3-4 years. Imagine everybody in your country are working on your farm and you are not paying them. You know how rich you will become in a few years? So Africa were exploited. The labor was exploited. The human resources was exploited. The natural resources. These guys were in charge of our territory for 500 years. They were transporting the gold and the diamonds to build Europe. Europeans have no fertile soil. It's all ice, nothing grows. So they took everything and built their states. The modern European success is on the sweat and the back of African resources and African people. That's the economic impact. Now the cultural impact. You and I here right now, we're speaking English. It's not our choice. That's the impact of colonialism. So some people that's progress is not. Progress is when your culture evolves to a level where it has entered modernity. Your culture is your worldview. So your culture has to develop with your worldview. So you cannot leave your culture behind and develop in another person's culture. So what happened is that we left our culture and say we are moving towards civilization. And the culture which identifies us, we call it primitive and leave it behind. It's like going and leaving your soul behind you and say you're going to heaven. And the soul is the one that goes with you. Okay. So African development is not possible because the African culture has been relegated to primitivism and the European culture has been taken. So we have a cultural problem, economic problem, and political problem which came along with colonialism.
Wow. Mr. Edward Amara, what's your take on the question? I mean, the impact of colonialism. I mean, let's hear from you.
Absolutely. In fact, if you watch at the impact of colonialism in Africa or on the African continent, it's so huge to understand that we cannot even complete a discussion with it. One thing, even let us just say, because as is rightly said, it involves a political one, it's a cultural one, and also even into
economics.
Economics. As he rightly said, when you watch at the political culture, when Europeans came, they were so cunning and they were very, very trained criminals to ensure that they exploit the African society without us getting the knowledge about it. That is why they came. They have what they call the comparative bourgeoisies. They have the proletariat, they have also the petit bourgeoisies, and they have the peasant. And those comparative bourgeoisies, these are people that we are well placed. They are like bankers. They used to use them how they can manage to exploit Africa. The petit bourgeoisies, these we are just like middle workers who are actually involved into the African society to ensure that they are middlemen. They work for them and they receive whatsoever thing. At the end of the day, they are given certain things in return. It could be like money, barter system, or whatsoever thing. And they have the peasant. The peasants, these we are our farmers who we have found in our community, who we actually used to farm for us because these are the people that manage the affairs of Africa. They provide food for us and other environmental protection. But when these Europeans came, they were very cunning, as I said initially. They did whatsoever thing they could to ensure that they land Africa into a situation that it would be very difficult for Africa to survive herself without us gaining adequate knowledge about what they were doing. So when you watch at the political system, they came on the basic of exploitation. That is why, because of the culture they implanted into most of our Pan-African leaders or most of the African leaders who took over the baton of power just after Europe left Africa. This we are also very corrupt because the European who actually liberated us, we liberate ourselves from them, but who actually colonized us, they implanted into them corruption, the culture of exploitation. No wonder if you see certain African countries like Sierra Leone, if you talk, we got independent there in 1961, and the first prime minister that took over was Salmin Timangai, and he also continued with other people. All of these African leaders, we are well trained and qualified into the art of corruption because that was what the European mentality taught them about. Even the type of education that they introduced into Africa was a very corrupted one. They were so careful enough, they knew that they cannot introduce skill education here. They do not have to come and introduce an education that will be able to use our natural resources that we have here. What they introduced was a kind of server education. Essentially, when we are the one that you can read, you write at the same time, you interpret. And the writing, arithmetic education, reading and writing, these are some of the things. All of them we are server education, how they can manage to carefully serve the Europeans. So even the development that they claim that they introduced in Africa, these are not development. They only introduce good road network in areas or environment where they know that there are natural resources over there, they can exploit them. So they corrupted the typical African way of setting They in fact, they bastardize everything. It is only now in Africa, people no longer, when you watch about culture, you see them, they think that they are going to practice Satanism. It's not Satanism, because we have our own culture, we have our way of life, we have our own way of looking things. But the European helps the Africans to overlook everything African, they value everything European. This is why, even in Africa here today, if a layman is producing something that is naturally made of an African mentality, they will tend to condemn it and they only value what is European. So the ramification is so negative. It is affecting our own way of life. It is affecting the educational system. You watch at China, or let us just say, watch at the continent of Asia. You have the Asian tigers like of Singapore, Malaysia. You talk about China. All these we are backward countries. What do you think educated them? It is the technological education skill. It is not the type of book you and I could just come on TV or whatsoever we speak them. No. What we needed in Africa by then was a carefully planned education system that actually have the value of our own culture and that can make maximum use of the natural resources that we have there. So even when in time of the economy system, you watch at the economy, what African produce, we produce the primary resources. And most of these things are raw materials. They send them to Europe. At the end of the day, they return this thing to us. At the same time, they sell them in bigger price. So Africans today do not have even the culture of production, because those who came and did it never taught us the culture of production. So today, this is definitely negatively affecting how we are, and we must try to find a way out.
Wow, thank you so much, Edward Amara, Focus on Liberia correspondent in Freetown, Sierra Leone. Also here is Mr. Sekou Kelleh, who is in Canada. The two gentlemen are the hosts and co-hosts of Roundtable Africa, and I'm Anthony C. moderating. Welcome to the discussions where we discuss the issues of Africa and how we can find a solution. Up next, we will be talking about decolonizing Africa's educational system. These gentlemen are saying that is one of the surest ways that we can try to get that African independence and reclaim our own identity to be able to move forward. But before we can get to that, we will allow Sekou to take us through images that tell the story of Africa. And so let me bring that quickly so that Sekou can be able to explain that to us. So folks, we are about to go around Africa in pictures and images that will tell you the stories that are needed to be heard. So Mr. Kelleh, there you have it right there. Talk to us quickly.
So Antonio, the image you have there is found in Dakar, Senegal, and it was constructed by the former president of Senegal, Abdoulaye Wade, around 2012 or so. This is called the Renaissance Monument, the African Renaissance Monument. There you see the woman, you see the man, and the baby there on the shoulder. This is the African philosophy being explained here. So what the African Renaissance Monument is saying, you see the child is pointing to the east, the rising sun, and you see the man is standing there leaning on his wife and holding the wife. It's saying that longer there is a woman and there is a man, the African will all continue to exist because we'll keep on reproducing and the future is still bright. That we are moving into the future. That death is not the end, and the suffering and the colonialism and all we went through is not the end. As long as there is a black woman, there is a black man, there will always be a black offspring that will conquer the future. So this is a pre-colonial Black Africa by Cheikh Anta Diop. Here is where this scholar, this brilliant scholar, explained that when European came into contact with Africa in the 14th century, Africa was in a regression. The same period European were in the 5th century when the Arab conquered them and the Arab ruled over them. Okay, this is our dark ages they met us in. It doesn't mean that we did not have a classical period of writing, mathematics, science. We had that period. Then we went into regression. So our story cannot start with colonialism. We have to go back further and see our greatness so that we can be able to construct a future.
And Sekou, I mean, looking at the image there, you know, that sister, that African woman, I mean, tell me about that beauty. I mean, look at the culture being displayed to the fullest.
Yeah. She is having this motif on her, this African painting, trying to tell you that she connects with her ancestors. She knows her root. She's trying to connect her memory to her past in order to build the future, because she's holding a book in her hand, which is a modern tool. But then she's also connected consciously to her past. This is what we call historical consciousness of identity. This is a National Geographic magazine called The Black Pharaoh. It was published in the US a few years ago. Europeans were shocked when they wake up one morning. The American National Geographic published this and called The Black Pharaohs, the golden age of African history. So most white people did not know that the pharaohs were blacks. They were Africans. So when they saw their magazine written by their own USA, the National Geographic, people became surprised and they began to read that, yes, the pharaohs, the Tahaka, Shabaka, all these great pharaohs that have all the mathematics, writing, and some of the pyramids you see in Egypt today were the same African that you enslaved a few years ago. So our age and our history did not begin with slavery. And it will not end in our modern problem. Here is a display of great African civilization. You can see these are live images of some of the pharaoh that their images they left in stone. You can see the sister there with her braid. You can see the black skin of Pharaoh Djibouti that is in front there. And this is African civilization in the classical period. So this book is called Stolen Legacy. It was written by a professor of Greek history. He's called George G.M. James in 1954, where he showed that what we call Greek philosophy, all these people we praise in Plato, Aristotle, they all came to Africa to study. All this philosophy that we learn about Greeks, they learn it right here in Africa. And this book gave you all the detailed account, how the Greek told their people that we did not have any philosophy. We learned this philosophy from Black Ethiopians. So this picture, it just gave you, it's a paint, something that was done 3000 BC. This is, you see Africa up there in Sudan building pyramids. During this period, there was no single civilization in Europe. Human beings were living, they could not even bury their dead. Europeans did not even know that human beings were supposed to be buried. They were living the most backward life that you can ever imagine. This is Africa in 3000 BC. This is Europe in 3000 BC. To tell you that how the table has turned and how we need to remember to be able to, that the future is possible. So this is an African philosophy by Theophilo Obenga, one of the distinguished scholars of Africa today. He's still alive. So many people think that Africa doesn't have a philosophy because Europeans say we have what we call ethno-philosophy, all the irrational proverb, the bird sits on the tree and all these things, but we don't really have a dialectic, a philosophy that explains rationality, that try to question things. But this professor here did his research, translated text from Egypt around Africa all over and present African philosophy in its finest form. Anybody can get this book and you will be surprised. So Black Africa, the economic and cultural basis for the federated state. This is Cheikh Anta Diop, one of his last books, to tell you that the future of Africa, if Africa will ever come out of the misery it's in, we need an economic that will transform our country. We need our culture to be revived, and we need a federated state. We have to defeat tribalism. We have to defeat this religious polarization, and we have to go for a federated state to build a strong nation. Here, this is a very interesting comment. It's that people say that slaves were taken from Africa, but this is not true. People were taken from Africa and they were made into slaves. Most of the time when people talk about slaves, they say, oh, slaves were taken out of Africa. Slavery did not exist in Africa. There are no plantations you will show me where African kings were enslaving people to produce crops for them. It was noble men, hardworking people, soldiers, military men, farmers that were kidnapped and taken to the America and be enslaved. So it's better for all to use the word, they were enslaved. They were not slaves that were taken. Yeah, we just talked about this book. So this picture here is cut. It tried to tell you, it show you industrial Europe and Africa being the producer of natural resources. The education that was given to my brother was brilliantly trying to explain. The European gave us an education where we studied theory and we would never practicalize this theory. This educational system is what we have. We produce politicians, talkative, people that are not science-based, that cannot produce industry, that cannot do nothing. So they have the industry and they don't want us to industrialize. They want us to produce the natural resources and they will do the fine product and bring it back to us. We have to change that dynamics. That's the only way we can make it. So African civilization, if you go to the timeline of African history, you will understand that colonialism was just an accident in our history. If you go back 3,000, 4,000 BC, Africans were writing books, mathematics, doing great work. The older mathematics script that was found is called the Ishango. It was found in Congo. It's over 50,000 years old. Can you imagine that? You have another one 35,000 years old. Only in Africa you find those kind of documents. In Congo, this is not even Egypt now. Places in Congo, these things have been found. So are we supposed to start our history with colonialism and say that thank God European came and gave us writing? There are over 20 scripts and writing system in Africa that are older than any writing system in Europe. But they are not being developed. You see, today, the colonialism has produced what we now call neocolonialism. And then neocolonialism is what is being explained here. France is controlling a certain number of countries in Africa. They keep their bank reserves in France. Most countries you see today that are speaking French in West Africa, they are paying tax, colonial tax to France. Okay, the African nations too, we are not free. So economically, we are not free. Militarily, we are not free. Intellectually, we are not free. And we are talking about development. So how Europe underdeveloped Africa? This brilliant brother from the Caribbean, he wrote this book, Walter Rodney, where he explained what capitalism is. It's about exploitation. It's about maximization of profit at the expense of human beings. That's why you can have pharmaceutical companies today. They can produce drugs that kill you. They don't care. They want to make profit. Okay, the science and the educational system we have today is based on capitalism. It's based on exploitation. It's not based on humanism. It's not based on even the science that we are studying today. It's about how do we exploit people and get more profit. It's not how do we develop humanity. How do we improve the quality of human beings? That's why you are extremely rich country, extremely poor country. And when you have exploitation in any society, it means somebody is enjoying privilege.
Edward, you're just listening to your colleague, presentation there on those images. I mean, those images couldn't tell it better. What's your take? What's your reaction?
Yeah, it is always an unforgivable mistake if somebody utters a statement that Africa was not developed, it was not civilized, it was not educated, and it was ruled out of barbarism. It is just ignorance. Sometimes ignorance make you to utter a statement that may not definitely call for. You see, Europeans, for them to underdevelop Africa, they have to use strategies. And most of those strategies are meant to fortify their own goal and ensure that they achieve their own interests. You see, when Europe had industrial revolution, they realized that the slaves we are no longer needed. As he rightly said, it was not slaves that we are taken out of Africa, but rather brains we are taken out of Africa and slavery to Europe. But having come into the 1900s, realizing that slavery was no longer needed, the machines that they have invented actually can outdo the work of 1,000 slaves, just a single machine. They needed three things to target for. One, they wanted to continue getting natural resources or raw materials to feed their hungry industry in Europe. Africa was a virgin ground by then. They needed also a market where after the production of these things, because Europe was in a stage of competition. France is producing, Great Britain is producing, America, which was actually conquered around 15 states of America, we are also colonized by Great Britain. All of them, we are on the verge of creating things on their own. So they needed a market where they can actually use to sell this of their natural resources or their manufacturing resources. Africa was seen as a virgin ground. And they also needed area where they can show that they are still powerful to colonize Africa. And they also needed places where they can even settle and continue to exploit the natural resources. You think the like of South Africa, Zimbabwe, Angola, these are some of them because these are southern part of Africa. The weather over there is Euro-friendly. So you watch at it. Africa was classically seated. They had the way they are managing their own way of life, and they have a well-constructed system where obedience, law, and whatsoever thing was being enforced. But unfortunately, when a white man came, that's why if you read things all up, I tell you that they met us, we are one together. But the white man used his sense to ensure that the rope that held us apart was definitely cut. And when that rope was taken away, now we have fallen apart. So Europe actually managed to underdevelop Africa. We're trying to bastardize the system that we already have. They relegated it to an extent that even the best way for them to transform Africa was to introduce a type of education system that you just watch at Africa, you condemn him. Because now If somebody tell you about ATR, African traditional religion, why you and I will sit down, we describe them as witchcraft, wizard. And that was not definitely what the African mentality. Before this time, we have our witch doctors, but they call them witch doctors. In essence, here, whenever there was a situation into Africa that need the attention of them, they approach them and they solve it amicably. But now, if anybody announces himself that he or she is an ATR person, they try to condemn you, they relegate you, and they even try to put you in a position that you never belong to. Like when you see, they have what they call Egyptology. Then this is where they study about the history of Egypt, Egyptology. And when that the Egyptology means they study about the Egyptian history, and they tell you everything about Egypt. The great pharaohs we are definitely good great, because all about civilization started along the Nile, and Egypt was one of the, they say civilization all started in Egypt. Do you think that Egypt was also another African country? And they had contact with the Arabs, the Berbers for quite a long time. All of those things we are being disseminated bit by bit into Africa. If actual Africa was not a civilized place, it was not a well standardized place, we have our own law enforcement agency base, and they have a well-constructed system, how would civilization have started into Africa? So it was very cunning. But all I think about it was because the discovery of technology and the manner in which they use the technology was not actually meant to develop Africa, rather than to underdevelop Africa. So what, as you are saying, even our language has changed today. Why do you think a Frenchman doesn't believe into the mentality of a British man? It is because the education system normally transforms. It gives us a different way of life. We have different perception. So I think Africa need to decolonize itself from all the shackle of Europe, because mentally we are colonized. We are definitely colonized.
Thank you, folks. The program you are watching is Roundtable Africa. Here, I focus on Liberia with the two brilliant minds. Here, we discuss the issue of Africa and Africa only, and the issues that affect Africa, and how Africa can free itself of these coloniums, I don't know, should I call it virtues that is kind of suppressing us. And Chinua Achebe could not have said it better when he said the white man came and put a knife on the things that held us together, and those things are no longer, we don't see them the way we're supposed to see them. We are going for the white man culture, his way of life. We have to get back to basics and claim who we are. Folks, that brings me to this question, which I think you guys are telling me this is the root of the solution. And that question is, why should modern Africa decolonize or Pan-Africanize its educational system? Sekou, you start with this one.
Thank you very much. Brother Anthony, you see, in every competition, if you are trained to go for a competition, you understand that there's something you need the most, that's confidence, self-confidence. You need to believe in yourself that you can win before you go for a competition. Right. And in order to have self-confidence, you need self-esteem. And to have the self-esteem, you need to know who you are. In order for you to know who you are, you have to have the right knowledge about yourself. So we say, in the community of nations, in the clash of civilization, in order for Africa to compete, in order for Africa to successfully sit down on the table with European and discuss our colleagues and not our slaves versus master, Africa needs confidence. And to get that confidence, they need self-esteem. And that cannot be achieved without decolonizing the educational system. So what is that? We are talking about paradigm. The European paradigm, when a European look at you, he see you, he approach things in Africa based on his own lens. It's all European center. How does European value, European idea, and European culture perceive this reality? So we are saying, how does the African perceive and see reality? That's what we need to put in our educational system. So the educational system need to place the Africa and the African interest at the center of problem solving. The African child should be the center of our education, beginning with chronology. We don't start the chronology of our history with the European history. To say education started in Greece and Rome, and then the earlier people that started writing, they were Greek people. That's not the way we should begin our education. Our education should begin with our classical civilization, where what was the most brilliant moment in African history? That's where we begin our consciousness. When we do that, then what we do, we change the paradigm. We change the way an ordinary African would think. Then when we change the paradigm, we will change the orientation. So the orientation will be African wanting to develop Africa, Africa wanting to make Africa progress because they have that pride, that nationality, that nationalism in them to protect. Right now, Africa have nothing. People will tell you that there's no reason to die for Africa. What we the continent has been backward. The European king, they did their best. The continent could not go far. What am I even killing myself? But if you knew that this continent was once the cradle of civilization, the cradle of mathematics and writing, then you have a moral responsibility to say, we have to bring it back to be the cradle of civilization again. Then that orientation will be there. Then the economics also, you will see, you will not have people who are sellouts. You will not have people who are having the European mindset of democracy, and democracy that's not even working in Africa, that is being misunderstood. Institutions have been cut and pasted in Africa without being properly studied, without being properly integrated into the African understanding. So that you see all the institutions we have in Africa, they are failing because we don't even understand them. We just cut and paste. All the African presidents we have, they are acting like kings because they don't really understand what democratic principles, democratic values are, because they only cut and paste. So we need to organize our educational system, remove the European consciousness, put the African consciousness, then realign ourselves with our history, our classical history, and then go for the things that matters to Africans. Not things that matter to European, not European values, but our own values.
Thank you. And Edward, I know you started answering the question earlier, but I'll give you a minute or two to add to what your colleague just said. If Africa must be Africa, if Africans must see Africa for what Africa is, or if you don't know what Africa should be, it must start with decolonizing our education system. Edward, you said it well. Hey, these people came, they want to show us how to read and write, and they left. They didn't show us the educational skills that help to industrialize Europe, for which today they are producing. We are not producing anything. We just go to school and learn how to read. That is not enough. That does not give us the economic power. How do we decolonize these schools so that we can gain that economic power for Africa to be independent economically?
Oh, thank you very much. I think decolonization is already ongoing in Africa. It is not just holistic because you watch at it in different peripheries. When we talk about decolonization, you watch at the mentality, because you cannot change the typical African setting if you do not change the educational system. Because it is the young people who are going to school, if they are carefully and adequately educated into the African mentality, then definitely Africa can manage to rescue herself from the shackle of the nefarious activities of Europe. When you watch at it, Africa needs to decolonize its educational system, because an educational system that overlook the culture and the environment of the people, then it means that the education system is not even worth being learned. You see, first of all, they have actually managed to gain some ground, but we still have the thing, because we identify ourselves by our color and we believe that this continent belongs to us, and we cannot successfully strive into any other continent of the world rather than Africa. Let us forget about the language barrier. Is one of the great things that Africans, for them to decolonize themselves and come together and create a sustainable thing that the progress, the development in Africa is somehow difficult. But can we watch at certain things that we bring us together as Africans? Let us just forget about the culture that the Europeans impose on us, because the British impose the British culture on us. The French people impose the French culture on those French-speaking West African countries. And you watch at France. France is just a very small country, very small to an extent that even Congo, DRC Congo, can take France 5 times. It has a very small population compared to DRC Congo. But because they carefully manipulated African state because of their own mentality, I think Africa need to decolonize the educational system. And even the democracy system that they introduced. I do think that Africa democracy is actually meant for Africa, but it was not meant at the time they introduced it, because they knew that having one party system into Africa, but then that one party system will have seek to unify the people, see themselves as one, undertake on development, and when everything is set at its place. Europe was living on a dark space. You have monarchical system, you have feudalism, you have all sorts of systems into Europe. Do you think that this were a democratic state? No, they were not never democratic state. But they used the system to ensure that there is adequate development into Europe. And when the time of liberal democracy came, They introduced it into Europe. And when they introduced it in Europe, everybody welcomed it because development was already made. I think Africa still have the time, but we need to decolonize the way first we think about. We decolonize our mentality. We forget about barrier. If you watch at it, Africa is yet to decolonize itself in certain way. Just watch, I will have what we call ECOWAS, that is the Economic Community of West African States. But if you live from Sierra Leone to Liberia, you can be intimidated. From Liberia to Guinea, can be limited. But still, they have, when you watch at what? When you watch at the EU, that is the European Union, they have a very strong system where they can educate themselves. And America, somebody who's living in Britain has the opportunity to live into Belgium as the same way. So I think that although Britain is no longer part of EU, but people living in France can adequately live into Belgium and they have themselves educated. I think Africa need to fortify and reinforce the mentality of Pan-Africanism, and also reintroduce it into SADC, that is the Southern African Development Program, and even ECOWAS, that is the Economic Community of West Africa State. Let us all come together and fight against this European mentality. But up to now, it's really affecting us because our education system is definitely affected. I think it is high time Africans started learning their own languages into school, their culture, even ATR should be taken into high esteem, reintroduced, even down to this our secret society. There was a purpose why it was created. And even the Americans, the British, whosoever, they have their own secret society and they have a purpose. And all of those things we are meant to fortify the society so that they can speak with one word. I think it is high time Africa turn back to her own self and forget about being European into an African scale.
Thank you, Edward Amara there. Sekou, Africa is underdeveloped for the most part. The question is, is that on us? Or can we also blame the Europeans? My question is, who underdeveloped more than Africa? The Europeans or our African leaders?
First of all, I would say both.
Okay.
And then I will make the argument.
All right.
The European did not come to Africa to develop Africa. Nobody comes to develop other people's country. They came for resources. All the clashes we have in the world is because resources are scarce and people need resources. Industry, countries need resources to survive. If you don't have enough resources, you try to take over other nations. That's what China is doing. So European arrival in Africa was for one reason only, to deplete the resources and develop Europe. And they achieved that. Modern Africa, to understand that modern African also participated, their leadership, the elite, they participated in the underdevelopment of Africa. You need to understand in 1960 what took place during the independence era. Let me talk about our little region there. Ufwe Boigny, first president of Ivory Coast. Kwame Nkrumah, the first president. Then you have right there Guinea, Sekou Touré, and other people. What happened? These guys, they gained independence. And then France said, we don't want to give you total independence. We want you economically and militarily depend on us. So we want to give you independence into interdependence. They call it, that's how they call it. You still depend on us, but you are somehow independent. So Kwame Nkrumah said, never, no African country should accept that. We want total independence. In fact, he said, my country name is called Gold Coast. I'm changing the name to Ghana after Ghana Empire. I should not be named by people. When somebody name you, they name their dog. Ivory Coast, Ufwe Boigny said, no, we have to walk along with these people. We are now Black French. That's how he left his country name, still called La Côte d'Ivoire, the country of our Ivory Coast, where people go to steal ivory. What a ridiculous name for a country, and they still bear it. Okay, you have a Burkina Faso. The guy decided that no, my country cannot be called Upper Volta. I'm going to call it Burkina Faso, the land of men of integrity. But the European name is Upper Volta. Today we are called Liberia. We don't even, the 16 tribes we have in Liberia, none of them have the word Liberia in their language. It doesn't mean nothing in our languages. But that's our country. You are Sierra Leone, Mountain of Lions. It means nothing for the people that live there. So the independence, when it happened, our leaders were not conscious. They were already into the European paradigm. So they were already caught into the European idea of globalization. And that globalization was to profit European industries, to develop them, and our countries to be able to be the farms and the producer of crops. Liberia produces rubber, America produces tire. Africa produces cocoa, then France produces chocolate. This is the game. And our leaders were caught into that net. They put little money in their pocket. They send their children abroad to live good life. at the detriment of our development. So industrialization failed in Africa because European planned it and then African elite were there to execute it.
And Edward,
Yeah.
that was many years ago. I know it happened in some shape and forms. The foreign direct investment, the IMF, the multilateral institutions, they are coming, say they're giving loan, the interest is in some form. But I want to ask this question, or I want to make this statement that I don't think Africans should be blaming European this time. I see Africans have it in them now to be independent. What is stopping that from happening today, Edward?
Come again, the network.
Oh, okay. I'm saying, what is stopping African leaders from being truly independent today? And instead of blaming the Europeans, for not doing for us when we felt that, they should have done for us. I mean, we are in charge now, aren't we?
Thank you very much. I think that is why it is always wrong to learn your child bad tricks. I think everything started based on the European mentality and their ideology for colonizing us. You see, when the leaders who actually took over just after the European left, we are carefully taught the exploitative mentality of the Europeans. That is why even though when they left, they still had the belief that
Edward, hold on. Can you talk to the folks behind you that you are in an interview? Yeah. So mute yourself and talk to them. Mute yourself and talk to them. Let me take you off the screen, and then you can come back because we're getting the noise here. This is a very informative conversation we're having here. People following. We don't want anything to distract us. So while we wait for Edward to come, let me see if all is well at his end. Mr. Amara, is it okay now?
Yes.
All right, go ahead then.
Yeah, I said that is why I started saying it's always wrong to teach your child bad tricks. You see, when Europeans were living, they carefully implanted in Africa people that can continue their exploitative mentality. And even when they left, they already created a culture of an exploitative African society based on the caliber of leadership that they created. Africans were actually left to rule Africa. But with what ideology were they ruling Africa? Was it the European mentality or that of an African mentality? It was a typical European mentality where you have the opportunity to exploit your subjects. And when you can exploit the environment and also exploit your subject and use political strength against them, as long as it is meant to benefit your own inner cycle. So now, we can say the blame should be holistic, but on a scale of 10, I'm going to give Europeans 8, and I give to the African man 2, because prior to their coming into Africa, Africa was not an exploitative ground. It was a ground where we have our kings and queens leading us. They protect, enforce, and maintain the law, ensure that their subjects are being equally treated on a fair basis. And you can only be enslaved, and even enslavement by then was also taking place in Europe, but it was not meant onto the scale that Africans were being taken. Because if you go and fight a war and have some captive, you treat them as your slave, but these people were also treated as human because they regard themselves as one. Unfortunately, when Europe came, they introduced such thing like that. So it is their mentality. Africans, because of what? Let's say, because when you watch at everything that is happening today, we have dictatorial regime into Africa. You have certain countries, look like Angola. How long do you think the Dos Santos regime continued there? For quite a long time. It was only some part of 2018 when he was taken out. You talk about Equatorial Guinea. We have the president over there who has been over there over 40 or 45 years. You watch at the like of what do they call this country? Uganda. Here you have Yoweri Museveni. Since 1986, he took over power. You see what is happening today in Rwanda. You may see Rwanda have a very better economy, but look at what Paul Kagame is doing. He may even be power up to from now to the year to 2036. You see what is happening today in Cameroon, where you have Paul Biya. So there is now culture, and most of these leaders actually took power just after Europe left. So now Africa can only decolonize itself if we have different generations who are not associated with the colonial mentality. But most of this generation who are actually leading Africa have a lot of dealing with the colonial mentality. Most of these guys who are leading Africa today, they already have wealth of things built into European countries. And if they are not in power, they can easily go into Europe to live it. So the best way we can do it, and to forget about blaming the African, is to first space out the generation that have any connection with the European with colonialism. Those who actually have any connection with colonialism, as long as they continue to lead Africa, definitely for us to decolonize ourselves is very difficult, because the leadership itself does not have that adequate or absolute belief that Africa need to be decolonized. So first, let us have an African where we have Africans who have never ever shared the history of colonialism, whose families have never been part and parcel of such thing, to lead Africa. As long as you don't have that deep connection in Europe, Africa can progress. But if you're having leadership that have deep connection with European countries, still they have that mentality. So to me, the blame is work of Africa, because they still have that culture into them, and the educational culture being created into us will never lead Africa to colonization if we cannot wave it up and implement something that is good for us.
Edward Amara there, folks. You are watching Focus on Liberia, and the program is called Roundtable Africa, where we discuss the issues of Africa and how we can solve these issues and have a better Africa that works for all Africans. We have our final segment, but before that final segment, I will read viewers' comments, and we will also bring in a little advertisement. And this is why we will be talking on next, which will be the last segment of this discussion. That is solutions to tribalism and religious conflicts in Africa. You want to know the answer coming from the two brilliant minds? Watch. But before we get to that, let us bring you some advertisement here. And then after that, we will read your comments for those of you who are following us. The first one here is Roundtable Africa. This is the program you are watching right now. It comes on every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time here at Focus on Liberia with Sekou, Kelleh, and Edward Amara. Also, we have every Friday, the program is called The Literary Hour with Jackie Sayer and Professor Dr. K. Mose Nambwe. This Friday, they will be discussing the Edward Wilmer Bladden and the quest for understanding Black personality. You don't want to miss it. These two individuals are scholars, and they are teaching literature in a style that only not instill values in you, but also establishes who you are as an individual in understanding the complexity of human understanding in the world. Not only that, we are in the Black History Month. Professor Dr. K. Mose Nambwe, but Dr. George Klekier, in commemoration of Black History Month, will be here to discuss the development policies of Liberia's presidents. All right, we'll talk about the open door policy, the higher height, man to mantras, farm to market road, the green revolution, vision 2020. Sound familiar? Child still all right? Vision 2030. Sound familiar? Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. And then the pro-poll of President George Manawia. You do not want to miss it, and it's coming out this Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, which is 10 p.m. GMT. You do not want to miss it. The man, Dr. Professor George Klekier, will lay it all on you. Another interesting one. In commemoration of Black History, we will be doing a show here on Chief Swakoko. Have you heard that name before in the history of Liberia? Swakoko, Chief Swakoko, the time, life, and contribution of Mana Yen Swakoko. And the person who will be discussing this is Timothy Nevin. This guy is a white professor. He's teaching at Cottington University. I have a privilege to have seen the PowerPoint presentation. Folks, you don't want to miss that thing. It's juicy with the history of Liberia. Well, because of time, we will cut short the commercial. We will show the rest in subsequent show. I think there's a show coming up also at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Maybe I will get to that. But let's read your comments here quickly. This one is from Tutu. This is so interesting. May Allah empower Mama Africa. Thank you, guys. Of course, it is interesting. Simeon Kroma writes, who is Allah? Guys are discussing African decolonization here, not Arabic manipulation. Oh, there's a debate going on here. Allah is the creator of the seven heavens and the earth and all that within them. All right, I don't want to be part of this discussion right now. Tutu again, Islam was imposed on you. Oh, I think there's a different debate going on here. All right, Eugenia Ja writes, program is informative. Thank you, guys. Thank you for watching, Eugenia. We appreciate you. And then we have, this is a gentleman doing his PhD. His name is Mr. Carr. Great question. Oh, yeah. I try to ask good questions here. John Mawolo, Edward camera is 90% on the money. Edward, okay, that Amara, he meant to say Edward Amara is 90% on the money. Edward, I don't know whether you agree. Are you 90% on the money? This one is from Abraham F. Fufana. I'm watching you from Thomasburg, Bombing County. Oh, that name Thomasburg flash some kind of memory to me. Let's see this one for Mr. Kite. Remember that democracy concept of it existed in many African ethnic groups. Yeah, he said the concept of democracy existed in many African ethnic groups some time ago. Folks, that is the reading of your comments. Sorry, we can't get to all of that. We need to close the broadcast. Gentlemen, let's come to the final segment of this discussion. And then in this segment, we are discussing solutions to tribalism and religious conflicts in Africa. And this is the question that I'm asking, gentlemen. What is the Pan-African solution to tribalism and religious conflicts in Africa? Let's go for it.
All right, thank you, Mr. C. Excellent presentation. What's the solution to religious and tribal conflict in Africa? The Pan-African leaders have done a lot of good job in trying to answer some of these questions that affect Black people and how we can actually progress and move ahead. And some questions are really difficult, but they try to, as much as possible, to provide answers. You see, the African identity has been the center of Pan-Africanism. How do a Black man identify himself, and how can he be able to be in unity with his brother without this division created by colonialism? And two things have been the problem: is tribe and religion. If I'm from Mamadingo and you are Kran or Kisi, and we are from two different religions, first of all, there's a gap between us. Then if the society tells us again that we come from two different tribes, that's another bigger gap. How do you expect these two people to come together and build a vibrant nation? So what the Pan-African philosophy is saying, that the solution to this is to, first of all, classical history. The classical history will create, that historical consciousness will create a new identity in the African. So that no African goes to look for their ancestor in Israel or look for their ancestor in Arabia. It is to look for their ancestor in Africa and be proud of it. That alone, that historical consciousness, even though if you vie or you give, but we know that somehow we can find ourselves in Mande Empire. We can trace ourselves back to Ghana Empire. Then there's something that connects us, which is historical consciousness. But what the colonial education have done is that they have taught us ethnology. Ethnology is the teaching that Africa is a group, a collection of tribes that are disconnected. They don't have any relation with each other. So that tribal consciousness thing we make us to think that we are different groups of people. But what our intellectuals need to do, our educators need to do, is to so that we are not actually tribes. We are a group of nations that came together to build a state, but our ancestral and civilization is the same, and we can trace them back to our classical history. So if we do that, then we destroy the tribal sentiment. What we build is a classical history and an African identity. So that tribe become a mere family group that you can just relate to, but your other tribe become your extended family member, and you all belong to the same civilization. When it comes to religion, there is a divergent view. Some say we should create a peaceful Christianity and a peaceful Islam that is not connected with Arabia and Europe. A Christianity and Islam that is integrated into African culture, that is able to explain the African experience and relate to African culture, and not treat African culture as witchcraft and what have you, but try to understand it and integrate it into the system. so that it becomes assimilated to our culture. But there's another view which I belong to, which is the Afrocentric view, to say that we have to revive the African philosophy and African spirituality. So it live in harmony with Christianity and Islam. So it becomes the equalizer. So that when
that's the one I belong to too. That is my view.
So it becomes the equalizer, so that when an African, there is an alternative. There's a third alternative, which is your ancestral spirituality. When you think whatever it is, you can build it, you can improve it. Every religion have gone through a Renaissance period. There was a period where Christianity was only Catholic. Then there was a period it transformed into Protestant. These are Renaissance period. African spirituality can go under renovation and reform. The aspect we don't like, we improve it and then bring it to the table of civilization so it can compete with the rest of the philosophy. The idea is to make the African identity to be reconciled with itself and its history. So we don't have a Saudi Wahhabism philosophy coming to create a holy war, so that we don't have a kind of evangelical kind of Christianity that is supported by Western capitalists to destabilize African government. We don't want this type of religious view. We want the African spirituality to live side by side with the religion as a reference, so we live in peace. And thirdly, the African state must be separated. Religion must be separated from the state if there will be peace. No African leader must be presenting one religion above the other. Religion will be totally separated from the state. Let African philosophy be the leading philosophy in our governance. Let religion be a private affair. Let it not be pushed into the state to avoid conflict.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Amara. This is our final question. What is the Pan-African solution to tribalism and religious conflict in Africa?
Thank you very much. I think we have fantastic solutions in Africa that can easily be undertaken as long as the mindset is willing. There is a clear disconnect between the white man religion and the one that they met into Africa. Coming to us, let me start first on the issue of tribalism. When you talk about tribalism, you talk about an arrogant mentality where one tribe thinks and feels that they are superior to others. They have the right to impose whatsoever mentality on them. And tribalism normally begins when you feel one tribe is dominated. If they are dominated, they want to, intend to introduce their culture or way of life on a minority tribe. But I think all of these things have been into Africa, but tribalism was not taken into a peak. There is no country in the world where you don't have different segments of people living together, but yet they manage to collaborate. But the white man was so cunning, when he came into Africa, wanting to what? Because they first make our kings and queens to feel very arrogant. And they feel very arrogant, they become very nepotist. Nepotist in essence here, they may want to appoint people who are closer to them, or people who they belong to the same tribe. Nepotism could just be related to your own family members. If you are a king, another person who should be leading you, like what is happening in Equatorial Guinea, the president's vice president is his son. That is very classically stupid and unbelievable for it to be happening up to now into an African society. So because the white man came and introduced that corrupt mentality, tribalism also become at its own peak, because our leaders were leading in the interest of their people. When the white man came, he introduced that draconian mentality. The leader understands that the best thing that he or she can do is to create a canopy of people who are around him to support their own interests. So the thing that he started doing to appoint people who are very close to him, either his tribe men. So right now we started to develop that African tribalism, and we believe that we started to behave about our own tribe and divert ourselves into different segments. So the best thing we can do is first to forget about wheresoever, maybe a Kisi, a Mende, a Gola, a Timini, a Pele, whatsoever, a Maningo, a Fula. Drop the mentality of tribalism. Understand that Africa belongs to you, and if Africa is absolutely developed, a Crown man will enjoy, a Pele man will enjoy, and if there is good road network, that road is not going to limit a crown man only transversing on it. But whosoever is a Maningo, a Fula, also have the right to transvert on it. And we also need to copy something from these Europeans who carefully exploited us. They don't believe into such thing like this. They don't believe into tribalism because they feel that the color with them. That is why if they want to discriminate against us, they do not discriminate against you because of your tribe. They discriminate against you because of your color. So I think it's that time we started taking some point. There are times you learn from bad examples and you exploit it positively on your own part. Because the white man is not discriminating or they are not humiliating, killing Africans because of their tribe. They are killing Africans because of their color. So I think it's high time we understood that Africans, we should identify ourselves about our color and develop Africa and forget about the tribal mentality because tribalism has got nothing to do with us. It will never develop Africa. It will continue to deteriorate the situation and our African brothers will continue. Some of us are living here in different way, but because of tribalism, they have desecrated the country and relegated it to a standard that nobody will tend to rescue it. And when it comes to religion, trust me, before the introduction of religion into Africa, we have our own set of mind. Our forefathers used to worship mountain hills and they depended on these things solely. They served our African society. But religion came carefully and separated us. Religion came with a kind of arrogance and lofty attitude. We Africans had their own culture, they have their own way of behaving, they have their own way of solving solutions. And when they came, they termed them as uncivilized, barbaric, and they classified them to be witchcraft. They were not witchcraft because they were meant to solve the African solution the African ways. And they have people who they have black magic. I don't consider somebody who believes in ATR to be somebody who is a black magic person. And each time they have a solution towards the community, you see them, they approach their priests. They approach them and they offer tangible and affordable solutions. And when the white man came, just a leaflet of paper, they introduced Bible to us. We don't know who wrote it. And when you read about it, they have a lot of controversy about Bible. But in African solution, we have a practical one. They get to the stream, and you see this thing happen. It was a very practical and tangible thing where the African solution was being solved. Before this time, most people in Africa, they're not believing to taking whatsoever does. They have their own way to solve this thing, and these problems, they are workable. I think it is high time we first identify ourselves by our culture. We identify ourselves by the continent that we're in, the color, and we see ourselves as one and forget about the religious mentality. Now, because of religion, there are even intermarriages in Africa that never take place. And I have been seen where you have one religion, we tell you that I don't believe into that Protestant mentality. I'm not going to let you marry my child. Protestant was never existing into Africa. It was something that was into Europe. In Africa, we don't believe in tribal. We see everybody as kingsman. That's why before this time, we tell you that in Africa, the African culture is that a child belongs to the community, but the child doesn't belong to a single child. And those things we are actually implemented into our culture. When a stranger comes or a guest coming to a town, that guest belongs to the entire community, not to a single person alone. So it is high time Africa rebel against the white man ideology and identify ourselves with our own religion, our own culture. We have the right to worship our mountain. If those mountains have the right, can solve our own solution. God is an almighty God. We all believe into God, but you go through things before ever you meet God. You can't go to the white man directly and meet God. You have to go through things. So Africa needs to identify ourselves.
Edward, Amara, Sekou, I saw you shaking your head. Is this comment?
Yeah, I see people making comment. I don't want to really go there because of the topic, but
yeah. So let's leave that. Hold on, Sekou. Leave that. We have to come to a close here, folks. You are watching Roundtable Africa. Here, I focus on Liberia with Sekou, Kelleh, and Edward Amara. I'm Anthony Sier, the moderator of this program, Roundtable Africa. These are two young, brilliant minds of Africa who understand the issues of Africa and how Africa can evolve into a modern Africa that can benefit Africans so that Africans can stop running away from their own homeland and going into the white man land. We have the same energy that they have. We have abundant natural resources. We just have to industrialize these resources and so that we can be able to stay at home and enjoy at home. The last time I was in my hometown of Southtown, I roasted snapper and I had my cassava, and it felt good. When will I get to that? I will go home. I will go home. But I want an Africa that I can go home to keep the lights on. This is what we are discussing, Roundtable Africa. Gentlemen, excellent, excellent, excellent discussion. We can go on and on and on. I know folks in cyberspace, this is the only platform where you can find educative program like this. And I would say it without any hesitation. Why should they go anywhere else? You will never find it anywhere else other than focus on Liberia. But gentlemen, we have to close. And let's start with Edward. Edward, your parting statement in 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think my parting statement is that let us forget about the European mentality and adopt and readjust ourselves for African mentality and accept the fact that Africans should be Africans, Europeans should be Europeans, and we should stop dressing ourselves into bold robe, because this bold robe will never help develop Africa. Tribalism should never be an issue or a thing that we should take into high esteem. Let us identify ourselves by the continent, by our color, and accept the fact that tribalism will only serve as a means to destroy the continent, and even to try to do away with the little corruption that the development that we already have. And in terms of religion, Africans have their own religion. If you're a Christian, you're a Muslim, or you are an 8-year-old person, or African traditional believer, it is high time we all unite ourselves to understand that having a disconnect or separation in religious mentality will even affect the way we do things and interacting. It doesn't matter who is living us, whether it's a Muslim, it's an African, it's a Christian, a Buddhist, a Hindu, or even talk about an 80-year-old person. Let us just support Africa as a force, because in terms of politics, religion should be debated. And we need to re-galvanize the little strength that we have and forward this continent ahead, so that anything Europe should be based into Europe. When it comes into Africa, let's allow us to behave like Africans. And let us forget about introducing European mentality into our African politics, our African way of life. And this message should be taken down to the grassroots, because everything has been carefully infected. And our education system also should be reconstructed on the African standard. We need to have our local languages or dialect introduced into our education system, so that those who are actually coming up, they should be taught about the African way of life, and they should be told our culture, the significance of African culture, our own tradition, and why it is good for us to maintain our culture, our way of life, and why it is for us to uphold our tradition that we have. Because any tribe or person or continent or wheresoever place or a group of people who cannot identify themselves by their own religion and tribe, those people are not actually worth to exist. So let us work. As long as we continue to live into the European color, it means Africa is not existing, because we cannot be in Africa and think European. I think it is better for us to think Africa and act globally. Thank you.
Edward Amara there. He is our West African correspondent, the co-host of Roundtable Africa here at Focus on Liberia. Edward, thank you for joining us in this yet another edition of Roundtable Africa. Sekou, time to close. What do you have for Africa? What do you have for Africans? Let's close.
Thank you, Anthony. Today, very interesting topic on Pan-Africanism versus Eurocentrism. So, folks, I want everyone to understand that it took Chinese philosophy to develop China. It took the European philosophy to develop Europe. It took Indian philosophy to develop India. It must take African philosophy to develop Africa. We cannot have it the other way. Nature will not change the rule for us. We will not take a European philosophy to develop Africa. Fish do not learn from birds how to fly. They have their own habitat, and they learn from their natural environment how to navigate the waters. They don't go to animals that are in the tree to teach them how to live aquatic life. No, every animal is given its natural environment to understand and how to live. We are African. Our experience, our suffering, and our gain, and the battle we've lost, we should put all that together to use it as a tool for our development. The African future will depend on African philosophy and African value. And this African value is what we need to know. And they don't come from no religion, they come from the African culture. Values like Ubuntu, values like Ma'at, values like Azosi. If you teach them in schools, we will produce a new breed. When we talk of African values, we have to go to the classical African culture and pick up those values, those things that we know that when you put them into our social value and the way people think, it will produce a different mindset. When an African is told about the philosophy of Ma'at, where there is a universal order, that in order for you to have a developed society, you need order, you need justice. if there is no justice, economic justice, political justice. This is where you begin before you have development. Other values, which I don't have time to explain here. So Pan-Africanism is trying to bring out African philosophy that all Africans must adhere to, so we can create an identity that is based on our historical consciousness, on our own experience, and not on other people's experience, and not on other people's vision of the world, but on our own vision of the world. So we come out of this tribalism. We can have educated people sitting on TV discussing tribes. We are not tribes. We are nations of people coming together to build a state, coming from one civilization and one ancestors. If we trace every ethnic group in every country in Africa, we will all end up in one language. Because even within the Mandingo language, there are people who don't even understand each other. The Mandingo of Guinea does not understand the Mandingo of Gambia. The Mandingo of Gambia does not understand certain Mandingo of Mali. But they are all called Mandingo tribe. No, that's to tell you that this tribe came about when group of people go settle in another place and the tongue change over time. That does not mean they are not the same people. That doesn't mean they are not the same civilization. So historical consciousness to build the African identity away from tribe, away from religion, to build a classical civilization that will take us out of this suffering.
Sekou Kelleh, the host of Roundtable Africa here, I focus on Liberia, and I'm Anthony Sie, the moderator here of this program. He couldn't have said it so succinctly, so brilliantly, and so eloquently, and so intelligently, he couldn't have said it. He said, and I quote, "It took the Chinese philosophy to build China, and you want to go to China to even get human hair, they call it. Really. And it took even the European philosophy to build Europe. The American philosophy that they call today American exceptionalism. What is your African philosophy? It must take an African philosophy. Oh, let me come to my home country, Liberia. It must take the Liberian philosophy to build Liberia. I remember those little tents our parents used to build for us. They were warm. They kept us safe. How can we improve on those? Oh, you go into the European to build you sunk in a house, and now out of a sudden you're wondering why this is happening? What I'm saying is we are Africans, and we must use the African philosophy to build Africa, because only Africa we can build for Africans, and it must come from us, the Africans. He even went further by saying, hey, the fish does not ask the bird where to go to live, talking about habitat. Will a bird ever ask a fish how to move around? No. And so those of you who are still looking for the white man idea to build your country, look again. But let me not bore you with this speech because I'm not good at it. Let me bring you a song that unites us. And that song says we are all Liberians. And Liberia is that only country that we cannot be deported from, even if we enjoy the hamburger in America and Europe. See you, folks. Bye-bye.
We are Liberians.